Where do you find God? Almost sounds like a loaded question, doesn't it? I mean, if God was someone you could find, wouldn't everyone be out searching? Well, rather than looking for something elusive, like a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, I reckon it's more about learning to recognise the way God is already present to us in our everyday lives. I'm Lizzie Oakes, and this is Where Do You Find God? My guest on the podcast today is Kristel van Houte. Now, Kristel is a marine and freshwater ecologist. She's passionate about sharing her love for nature and has taken her experience in biology, conservation and education in Kenya, the Pacific Islands and New Zealand, and contributes this to all the interesting work that she does. Kristel, welcome to Where Do You Find God?
Kia ora, nice to be here.
Now, you're involved in two separate projects, but obviously there's a crossover, and I just thought I might get you to explain in your words what exactly you do.
I like to say that part of my job is kind of inspiring people to connect to nature and to take care of it.
That's
I think
lovely.
That pretty much sums up what we do.
Yeah.
In all kinds of ways.
So you're the National Director of Arosha Aotearoa New Zealand, a charitable trust which is focused on community-based conservation and education. That's a worldwide organisation, isn't it?
Yeah, so we're part of an international organisation called Arosha. But then you have Arosha Kenya and Canada and Arosha Aotearoa New Zealand. So we're part of a collection of countries, and I've actually lost track of how many, but I think there's about 25 of us at the moment.
Wow, that's cool.
Yep.
And you've been involved in that for quite a few years, right?
Yeah, 20 years.
Wow,
yeah.
Okay. And
much.
then another project that you've got going on, tell us about that.
Yeah, the Kario project in Raglan. So that's basically on my doorstep.
Mm-hmm.
And the Kario project's part of, one of Arosha's projects. But we're also a community project. So, obviously no one owns that mountain. And collectively we take care of it. And Arosha has played a big part in making that happen.
Growing up, Kristel, did you always just have a really big love of nature? Like where does this come from, this absolute love of nature?
Yeah, it's really hard for me to even imagine not being, that person that loves nature. It was such an intrinsic big part of my life and, how I functioned in the world. So, early moments being on, my grandparents' farm, connecting with animals, just loving animals and wanting to take care of them. And, later on, riding horses, playing in streams, being at the beach, always in the water, covering myself, with mud, whatever. Whatever was going, I was in it.
You're in it.
And that was just part of how we did life, yeah.
With that sort of attitude, must be a fun mum, I would think.
Yeah,
got up to some crazy things with your kids.
Sometimes
other mothers,
they complain.
Which other mothers would go, don't do that, don't get dirty. I feel like you might be saying something different.
Yeah, I've kind of gone from, having these nicknames of cowgirl, rat girl, crab girl, depending on which species I was working with.
Yeah.
But yeah, both my kids are kind of nature kids, love the farm. And yeah, my daughter, I asked her the other day and I said, what are you thinking, in terms of what her interests were? I didn't want to say what are you going to do when you grow up?
Yeah.
But just kind of seeing where she was sitting with things, she goes, I'm still going to do something with animals.
Oh,
yeah, so that's cool. So yeah,
really cool.
doing the outdoorsy bits and hiking and just connecting with nature in all kinds of ways is a big part of our life.
Yeah, that's great. Kristel, in Acts chapter 17, verse 27, it says, God intended that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. So my question for you today, Kristel, is where do you find God?
Well, no surprises probably in nature. But I think, when you mentioned that question to me a while back, I kind of started thinking about that. And, for me, it's so much the interconnectedness of nature and people. And, I mean, that's kind of what, Arosha is all about, really. So I guess my work is my life.
Yeah.
And for me, that is where I found God. And there's been moments in my life where I've really turned my back on God. And then through my study, studied biology, through my work, but also just went times on my surfboard or been in the water, immersed. It's those moments when I have my God moments.
Yeah.
And, I think, that's And it's a real reminder that sometimes we can, make God this thing, or this person, or how this person behaves towards us, or whatever, it is. And for me, those moments of coming back to nature and kind of seeing, the awe and wonder and, the inspiration I get from nature and seeing God in there. God is, has breathed life into all those places and then gives them as a gift to us.
So
amazing, isn't
it?
That's it for me, I guess.
Yeah. Tell me more about being on your surfboard and encountering God, finding God in the surf.
Yeah, I just had this really specific moment one day when I was up north and out at Ahipara, and just kind of sitting on my board and waiting for a wave. And look, I'm no real fancy surfer, don't get me wrong, but enough I can sit on my board and catch a wave. And in my head there was this, it matters to me. And I was like, and I kind of had my hands in the water and I was like, I kind of hung on to that moment where I was like, this matters, this is matter and this matters.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
This is matter.
Yeah.
And it matters.
Yeah. And so, so often we can see nature as a resource or something that we can use, but it just has value in itself. And then, of course, hopefully when you see that, you're inspired to take care of it. So that's very much where my heart's at. But it's also how I now see God. And so I think, probably the old kind of idea of God as this angry man in the sky, I've had to really kind of deconstruct some of that personally.
Great.
To kind of, because that's not how I was feeling it or experiencing it. And that was confronting at times. So for me, those moments, and of course, surfing's fun.
It is.
We get out there and we have fun. But for me, often there's a real spiritual element to it as well, is having time, just walking across the sand, being in the water, and just a kind of healing time of being immersed in the water and then kind of also gaining perspective of what's important in life.
So you're spending time with the Creator in His creation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you said that thing about it matters, was that God kind of talking to you about a situation in your life or just what was around you, your environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was something in my head that kind of made sense at the time, and I think it was about the big awe and wonder and kind of seeing, beyond myself. But I think, when you think of a bigger picture of God, it's beyond any of our imaginations.
Yeah.
And, I always kind of think if I can explain God to anyone, it's probably, not worth believing in, right? If it's that simple.
Yeah.
But I think when you're in the ocean or in in the forest or wherever that is, even people that have no faith or don't profess to kind of, have a religious kind of life or of any kind will tell me that when they're in the forest that, there's something there.
Totally. They'll be like, I'm not really religious, but when I'm surfing or I'm out for a bushwalk, and I feel close to nature, I feel close to God there. And I'm like, yeah. And the amount of people who have come on this podcast who are Christians and say exactly the same thing.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of allowing that experience to kind of speak into your life. And so, I guess it's kind of helping myself kind of go, hey, God isn't about, what people say. It's about our experience and kind of being immersed in that. And for me, kind of going out in nature is a reminder to do that. And, there's moments of doubt in anyone and questions. And I think when you open yourself up to those moments, the answers come. And so, like you said, like it matters to me was, I guess, as much about me and what was going on inside of me as well as what's going out in the world.
Sure.
But I think, you do the inner work, and then I think there's a, opportunity for us to look outside ourselves and go, okay, what can I do with this? What have I learned, and what can I do better now?
Yeah, I'm just thinking of your experience in your study, with biology and conservation and different parts of the world and growing up. Like you were touching earlier about your grandparents' farm and just this connection to the natural world, which some of us have and some of us don't. that's your connection to God's creation. But I don't know, like we're his kids. I kind of feel like nature's his child as well. Does that something that resonates with you?
Yeah, for me, like there's no separation between how God or, God speaks through nature. We're part of nature. We return to dust, right? Okay. So for me, there's no disconnect.
Yeah.
But maybe there's an added expectation that we care for it.
Yes.
Just like we care for our neighbours, we care for our waterway and the forest next door or another species. And it gets complex, right? Because then there's also death and decomposition. And so, in a biological kind of sense, like sometimes I really grapple with that and I'm like, what does this all mean? And it's so complex and so interesting. And then, you kind of get to a moment where you're like, okay, now I can't explain it anymore. But I guess that's the bit where faith comes in, right?
Yeah, true.
Where you're like, actually, that's the faith bit. And I can live with that, live with the uncertainty or the not knowing.
Yeah, I just think, we're both mothers and you give your child something that you think, this is yours, you're going to love it. This is, I really want to bless you with this. And then they take it for granted or they don't take care of it, and he just kind of annoyed. And I just wonder how God feels about how we treat the planet, right?
Yeah. I think a big challenge for me has been that some of this is been so felt, a felt experience that I hadn't been able to put words to. And I think where we fail sometimes is if you just get a notebook of like, this is how we believe and this is what we believe, there's not the opportunity to explore it yourself. So I'm trying to be a lot less prescriptive in that way.
Yeah.
And I had a moment with my daughter some years ago where we were in the forest and we were checking some traps. And she had this stick and she was holding it out and this fantail came.
Wow.
And I was actually videoing her, like, because the fantail was fluttering around and it sat on the stick. And she turned around to me and she said, I think the bird's speaking to me. Or something like that. Like, it was
communicating.
And it was just so beautiful. And I was like, actually, she was more connected, to God in that moment than most of us are, when we really try and force that. And so, just like little moments like that where I'm like, actually, don't doubt yourself too much because the answers are always there and maybe words are just unnecessary. And so actually what I landed on then was like, when people say, what's your favourite verse? And my memory's shot, so I can never remember. So I've gone for a really simple one, but it makes complete sense, is be still and know that I'm God. And so to me, that's just like, oh my gosh, that just sums it up. Because when you're still, when you really start thinking or stop thinking in a way, but when you think about being still, like so much comes out of that. So that's one of the things I've really had to learn, is to actually stop overthinking it and letting my mind go quiet. It's really hard. But it's a good message for me.
Be still and know that I am God. Kristel Van Houte, thank you for joining me today on Where Do You Find God?
Thank you.
Tune in every Wednesday afternoon at 4:30 on Sanctuary, or listen and subscribe via your favourite podcast platform and give us a review so others can find us.